In 1493, the Nuremberg Chronicle is published. It contains a trove of invaluable woodcuts, the Temple Mount among them. Actually, as it happens, I also have that book. Here we have the so-called Nuremberg Chronicle. Tons and tons of woodcuts in here. One thing people back then did when they depicted biblical stories was that they took the motifs and put them in their own time. When they were talking about the Temple of Solomon, they would indeed try to make it the Dome of the Rock, but also in other motifs. So there are pictures of Mary and baby Jesus at a typical medieval breakfast table. They didn't do it because they were stupid or they didn't know that things were different in the past. They did it to sort of have a closer connection to these biblical stories. What has happened when they made this book? They commissioned artists to produce those woodcuts. They had 2 or 3 years time to produce hundreds and hundreds of woodcuts. Of course, they wouldn't go to all the cities of the world that are depicted in here and take notes and come back and make those woodcuts. That wouldn't have been possible. They took the information they could get. And one thing that was easy to get was Breitenbach's book with the Dome of the Rock. And that was then used by one of their artisans to create his own version. But it's rather confusing that the artistry appears to transcend time. As I explained to you before, this is not confusing at all. This is what the people back then did. It's just the way how they approached history. The Dome of the Rock is ablaze and a set of towers are toppled, flanked by mounted angels of death. And I'm not sure what he sees there. So I've got the book. I don't see angels of death anywhere. Maybe you see something that I don't. If anybody finds angels of death, let me know. I can't see any. With a mourner, a person in chains, and a homicide in progress. Well, there are 2 people close together. They may be killing each other, I don't know, but I don't see any weapons. But then it's very small. There's a horse. I don't know how you would know if somebody's mourning there, but I guess it makes sense if the temple is on fire. On the mountain stands the dismounted Satan himself, Prophet Muhammad. The author hates him to the extent that he fails to provide useful information about the Saracen history, let alone about the inside of the Dome of the Rock. We are looking at a picture of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. Why should it be Muhammad? Why is it not a representation of evil or just Satan himself? How should he have been able to provide useful information about the inside of the Dome of the Rock? Hartmann Schedel never was there. Of course, none of the artists were ever near there. It's amazing, like, what does AJ believe? There was no Zoom call to Jerusalem. Being a disciple of Elia Levita, Sebastian Münster publishes a detailed history of Jerusalem and its temple from its biblical beginnings. It's clearly derivative of the bottom picture here by Reuwig, who was an eyewitness. Now here he brings up depiction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This is again from the Sebastian Münster Chronicle. The argument by AJ is because the Holy Sepulchre here is so accurate, we can trust his depiction of the Dome of the Rock as well, and he interprets it as having an octagonal drum. And I would say again, it's very clear that all the details that are in here are taken from here. Very clearly a derivative work again. If you copy the Dome of the Rock from this book, why not also copy the Holy Sepulchre? It was done by an eyewitness. Obviously, we take this. But what does AJ say? It appears that we can trust that these drawings provide for the features that make these buildings distinguishable and are also independent from one another. In other words, the drum of the Dome of the Rock was octagonal and the cupola was different from its modern shape. What does he think? That these poor workers in these workshops making the woodcuts for a book commissioned by Sebastian Münster in the 16th century, that they went to the Middle East, to hostile territory, in order to make sketches which they could then bring home and make woodcuts out of? It's absurd. Of course, they took what they had available, and that was this book. The changed top of the Holy Sepulchre may be noted, but more importantly, the octagonal drum of the Dome of the Rock appear scaffolded as though under construction. I suggest it is primary evidence for the ongoing external decoration. Well, I suggest it's primary evidence for AJ's problem with sources.